Okay, so if you're planning to have a very modest area that you need watering, typically an area that you would water with a watering can, then your storage needs can be very modest. Just a single barrel that you fill your watering can. It'll last a long time, and I think that's perfectly adequate. But if you envision watering a larger area where you're going to need to connect a hose to your storage system, well, then all of a sudden your water needs grow quite considerably, and then a single tank, you'll find, just really won't be adequate. Just remember, the more water you need, the more water you're going to have to store, because it goes fast. It should be, as I mentioned, it should be your goal to minimize the amount of water, because it's a simpler system the less water you end up using. And the trick is to get that water down deep to minimize evaporation. That's going to be your biggest enemy as far as watering is concerned. And so I'm going to show you a few methods that we have been using around the house to minimize that water loss. So this is a very easy technique to use. We put the bucket near the plant that needs to be watered. We fill it up, and it takes between a half an hour to an hour for this bucket to empty out. And because it's dropping water slowly, the water tends to penetrate deeply. The issue when the ground gets very dry, and I'm sure all of you have seen this, is when you start to water that area, most of the water initially just rolls right off and runs down. It's like the ground has gotten a waterproof cover on top. So the trick here is to water slowly so it wets that top layer and then allows the water to start going straight down into the ground. From using the bucket with the holes, we advanced to trying out using old drink cups that we would sink down into the ground, and these cups have water just like the bucket does. But now, not what advantage you have here is, rather than having to wait to wet the ground before it starts sinking, penetrating into the soil, now it's already sunk into the soil. In most cases, the soil is somewhat damp, so it accepts the water very quickly. You'll find that if you use this type of approach on your garden, you'll end up using multiple cups, and rather than just sitting there holding water, you just fill the cup and you move on to the next cup, and it's a lot quicker. The next level is that with a large yard like we have here, carrying a bucket around to water is pretty slow. Even sinking those cups in is pretty slow, and also the fact that these are larger plants means that little cups are probably not going to put enough water in the ground. So what we've done here is we've actually gone ahead and sunk a PVC tube into the ground that have holes in it, and I've put a drip irrigation line in here, and we'll talk more about drip irrigation as the presentation progresses. But now we can drip water down there for an hour at a time, maybe a little longer, and the whole plant gets a really good watering deep down underground. When you're watering larger areas, especially if you are going to use some sort of a broadcast system like a sprinkler system, you should always water in the evening. There's a significant difference in terms of the evaporation of the water. In the evening, it's cool, there's no sun, and more of your water is going to get used. So let's move now to the storage system approaches and how to catch that rainwater. I'm going to show you what we've done around our house. I'm also going to ask a neighbor of mine, Keith McGee, to show you his system, and I'm also going to have an illustration of a very simple single barrel system. Now, a single barrel is just a single 55-gallon drum that you put under a downspout, and you catch water, and it's got a spigot, as you can see in the photo down at the bottom there, to fill your watering can, and a hose. But just bear in mind, if you use a hose, it's just not going to last very long. Key things to think about here is that if you do end up using a hose, the higher up you mount the barrel, the more pressure you're going to get, which means the stronger water flow you can get out of it. The other thing is you need to make sure that you have a good water overflow system. With a single barrel system, it's going to fill up very, very quickly. And so if you are mounting the rain barrel someplace where it doesn't matter if it just flows on the ground there, then that's fine. But oftentimes what will happen is you'll create a little flood or a little pool there, and if it's by the side of your house, which most people's downspouts are, then you have a problem potentially of water running into your basement or other issues that occur when you have excess water laying around. So make sure you have a good water flow overflow system that channels that water away from your house, if that's the case. So as I mentioned, I want to share with you the systems that we have at my house and Keith McGee has. Keith's going to go through his system, which is the next level up from a single barrel system.
Hi, I'm Keith McGee, and I have a water collection system, rainwater collection system, which I use to water the grass here. I don't like to use city water for the grass, so we have this collection system that uses a sprinkler to water the grass. So this is a small rainwater collection system. I've got it set up on this cabin, which is only about 750 square feet, so it's a pretty small system. The basic setup is I have 8 barrels, 55-gallon barrels, and there's 2 groups of 4. And each group of 4 is connected by a system that allows one barrel to fill and then to fill all the other barrels. And there's one part of this which Eric Shen came up with, which is, I think, pretty unique, or at least it's very effective. The system that ties the barrels together is at the bottom of each barrel, and gravity or water pressure allows all of the barrels to fill, and then you only need one outlet to actually empty all 4 barrels. So each one of the downspouts goes into the system of 4 barrels, and I've connected the downspout to the barrels with a flexible expandable adapter thing. And then for the openings of the barrels, I was able to get PVC to screw into the barrel, and then get this adapter which expands from the PVC pipe to a 4-inch downspout type pipe to allow me to put that in. And then to keep the debris out of the barrels, I would put some screens inside of that so that we keep the debris out, keep the water relatively clean, and so the pump doesn't plug up. And I put downspout extenders here because in the winter when we get a lot of rain, it's really good to keep the water away from the house as it runs downhill. So I get the water away from the house, and that allows it to stay relatively dry. You must have air vents for when the water fills the tank. The air's got to leave the tank, and when you empty the tank, you have to have air come in so you don't get a vacuum. So each of the barrels has some sort of an air vent to allow the water to go in and to come out. So the cost of this system is pretty cheap. You can buy 55-gallon barrels on Craigslist or someplace like that, anywhere from about $10 to $50 per barrel. The rest of these things are from any hardware store, very inexpensive PVC, various connectors and so forth. So the total cost of the system really isn't very much. The pump, which I use for the sprinkler, is anywhere from $50 to $100 depending on the brand that you actually get. So in total, it's a fairly inexpensive system. So I'll plug the pump in and show you how It feeds from both sets of barrels to a sprinkler system. What's really surprising is with this small roof area, how quickly these barrels fill up. It doesn't take a lot of rain to get 400 and some gallons of rainwater. One of the things I found is that with this 400 gallons of water, I planted grass seed in a fairly large area, and I was able to water that area 10 days in a row, and I still had plenty of rainwater left. So the rainwater goes quite a ways in watering the grass.
From Keith's system, it's easy to expand to something a little bit larger. And as you saw, going from the single barrel system to Keith's system, it really wasn't that big of a leap. You just added some piping, connected the two or three, four tanks together, and you have 4 times the storage capacity. In my case, we've gone a little further, and we've added a few more tanks, just a few, not too many, but it's basically the same approach. Once you've linked 2 barrels together, it's basically the same as linking 10 barrels together. It's not an issue whatsoever. So with the addition of a pump, that allows you the option of not having to be restricted to having your tank system right here next to your house. You can now start thinking about catching a batch of water and then pumping it to a remote location. So let's take a walk over to where we have our remote tanks located. So we're now at the upper part of my lot, and this is where we have 4 275 gallon tanks, so just a little bit over 1,000 gallons. And you can see by the fact that we've added a pump to the system, now we can pump water up to these tanks, and we've doubled the amount of water that I can store. Plus the fact that we're on a fairly steep lot. Now when we go to water our plants, I can start using sprinklers because the water down at the lower part of my lot has about 15 to 20 psi water pressure, which is enough to drive some small sprinklers. And once again, there are special little sprinklers that are tied especially for use with drip irrigation systems. So once again, the amount of water we put out is very conservative. The advantage of these larger tanks is they come with a valve on them. So all of a sudden now you have a way to isolate the tank without having to do any real modifications, and it's threaded, so you can just go to the store and buy a connector that allows you to connect directly and then reduce down to your pipe size. Despite how much you try to keep your roof clean, it's going to collect needles, leaves, moss, algae, you name it. And it's all going to come down and reside in your barrel. So sooner than or later, you're going to have to clear this bottom of the barrel out. And the simple way to do that is what I've done is just put a clean out here. And it's just got a plug here. Either at the end of the year or maybe at the first filling of the tank, I'll go ahead and open this, pull this open, and just let the water run out. And if no water's running out, then I'll just run a little stick up there or a little wire just to break it loose, and then it'll flood out and clean out the tank. To use your water from your rain barrel, I highly encourage you to consider some sort of filtration system. For the same reason I talked about the need to clear barrels out, some of that material is going to flow down your hose if you don't have a filtration system. Then what happens is that your hose nozzle gets plugged up, or your irrigation system just becomes non-functional very quickly. I use an irrigation filter system. It's very inexpensive, costs about $10, and basically it has a removable screen filter, which you just rinse off and put back in, and that prevents the particles that are going to cause any kind of problems for your irrigation system. I mentioned pumps earlier. Here's an example of the pump that we use. They're very expensive, and basically Harbor Freight has them. You can get them on Amazon, and I think they're about $20. The key thing to remember about pumps is to know how high you have to pump the water. And in our case, we have to pump our water up 100 feet or more. And so it will tell you right on the pump how far you can pump up with this. In this case, it's good for up to 30 meters. So we're just at the very top edge of what this pump will do. So I just wanted to show this to you because it's so that you'll recognize what it looks like, that it's readily available, and it's really not expensive. None of this equipment or the tanks I've shown you are expensive. The tanks cost used $5 to $10. Those IBC totes are somewhere between $75 and $100. So the components are very inexpensive. An interesting option if you have your own on-site water system is that now you have your own drinking water supply if you so need it. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to show you some systems that are largely from the backpacking community, but not all of them, that allow you to create drinkable water from your rainwater catchment system. At the very simplest, what we have is a life straw, and it has filter media in it that will take out the sediment as well as filter out viruses and bacteria. And it is the simplest system, and it's also one of the least expensive systems. It's about 20 bucks for this kind of a system, and you just fill the water in this bag, or you can attach a straw to it that generally comes with these systems, and just put it the water in the bag, or dunk your straw in the water up, but not up to the filter, and then you just suck on it and you get fresh water that way. Another interesting approach is a non-filtration system. Will work well with our rainwater catchment system because we don't have a lot of sediment and the water is generally pretty clear, is an ultraviolet treatment system. Basically, we use this to kill the bacteria and viruses. This particular unit is called a SteriPen, and you have presets on it that you push one time for half a quart and twice for a liter, and it's very simple. You just put this in the water, you turn it on, it turns on this light, you just swish it around while the light is on, and when it's done, the water's been sterilized and it's ready for drinking. It's very quick, very simple, and has been proven to be very safe. Lastly, but probably the most practical for most household applications, is a 5-gallon barrel, a 5-gallon filtration system. This kind of a system is often used for disaster situations, or when people are on missionary trips to third world countries where freshwater access is very limited. Basically, in a nutshell, you pour water in this upper tank, and by gravity it goes through a filter that's located inside, which we'll take a look at in a few minutes here, and the water just slowly drips down into the lower tank, and then when you want to have water, it's got a spigot, and nothing could be simpler. To wrap up, thank you for coming out to my house to view my rainwater catchment system. It's been fun sharing with you. I want you to keep in mind that it doesn't have to be complicated. It can be as simple or as complex as you want. You can start out small and expand the system. So I want you to start thinking about including this as part of your sustainable living plan, and just remember, you don't want to waste treated city water by watering your garden which is essentially flushing water down the drain. Thank you.